have a fruitful, productive, and inshallah, insightful lectures and other activities organized for the day. And as always, we'll be beginning with the recitation of the Holy Quran with Brother Muhammad Reza Ziyara. Can we please welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
There you go. It's fine. Check the audio. We just need to change the title. To what? Prophet Muhammad, perfection of character, Dr. Yasser.
وقال الذين لا يرجون لقاءنا لولا أنزل علينا الملائكة أو نرى ربنا لقد استكبروا في أنفسهم وعتوا عتوا كبيرا يوم يرون الملائكة لا بشرى يومئذ للمجرمين ويقولون حجرا محجورا وقدمنا عملوا من عمل فجعلناه هباء منثورا أصحاب الجنة يومئذ خير مستقرا وأحسن مقيلا ويوم تشقق السماء بالغمام ونزل الملائكة تنزيلا الملك ويوم يعض الظالم على يديه يقول يا ليتني اتخذت مع الرسول سبيلا يا ويلتى ليتني لم أتخذ فلانا خليلا لقد أضلني عن الذكر بعد إذ جاءني وكان الشيطان للإنسان خذولا وقال الرسول يا رب إن قوم اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا من المجرمين وكفى بربك هاديا ونصيرا وقال الذين كفروا لولا نزل عليه القرآن جملة واحدة كذلك لنثبت به فؤادك ورتلناه ترتيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلى على محمد وعلى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum. We've started the wedding.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad, for the beautiful Quran recitation. Inshallah, today we'll be also continuing with the main segment for tonight, which will be from Dr. Yasser. Please welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allah.
Just plug in. We need like 350 download.
This talk, inshallah, is going to be semi-interactive, not like the last time. If I can trouble you to go on to quizzes on your phone.
check. Huh? Yeah, I just went on the video itself. Whoops. Yeah, it's over now.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Today, inshallah, I will be talking to you about the Prophet. Those of you who were here last time,
Yeah, man.
we also talked about the Prophet. We talked about his political achievements and his mastery of politics and of society. Today, we're going to talk about his perfection of character. Now, I received criticism last time, probably valid, that by emphasizing just on his political achievements, that I missed out on the greatest aspect of the Prophet, which is his akhlaq, his manners, his behavior. So inshallah, I aim to remedy that today. If everyone's joined, or are they joining? I'll talk to you about how I got to this topic actually. It wasn't just a criticism. Some of you I've told this story to, but I'll repeat it for those who haven't heard. Last Ramadan, so almost a year ago, I was looking into the tafsir of Surah Al-Najm. Now Surah Al-Najm is split into 3 different sections, but the first section deals with the Isra and Mi'raj of the Prophet, where he was raised to heaven. And I've been stuck on that part. I've been stuck on that part since then. Because in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the journey of the Prophet.
Put down the volume a little bit.
And he says stuff about the Prophet which, to me, boggles my mind. He says, ثم دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى. That he was raised to such a level when he went to this other world that he was within 2 bow lengths of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That he reached a level عند سدرة المنتهى where Gabriel could not follow him, and he left him and he ascended further and further ahead. Sorry, I'll talk about it. And I thought to myself, so, okay, what is it about the Prophet that makes him so amazing that he reaches such a high level? I thought first maybe it was because he was so spiritual, that he was so connected to Allah. I skipped too far. All right. First question. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the Prophet on one thing. What was it? Thank you. Alhamdulillah, almost everyone got it correct. His manners and his behavior. The Quran says, nowhere in the Quran does it praise him for his prayers, or his spirituality, or his good looks, or his bravery. It says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And indeed you possess a great character. Now, the English translation here does not do the actual Arabic justice, because within this, the Prophet is being described as a complete, 100% perfect human being. And this is what we have to understand to be able to understand the level that the Prophet has reached. Sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The Prophet said himself, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتِمَّ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent, indeed I have been sent to perfect good character. Now in the Quran there are several places where Allah has like a mission statement. What is the aim and objectives of Islam? What is the aim of this message? Here the Prophet is summarizing the objective, his only objective, because the innama in Arabic means that it is in this case and nothing else. So innama bu'ithtu li'utimma makarim al-akhlaq, I have been sent, only been sent to perfect good character. Now, another quote from the Prophet ﷺ, he says that the most faithful of you are the most well-mannered. You cannot be a true mu'min or even a true Muslim if you lack the manners of a Muslim. It is not enough to pray and fast and pay zakat and khumus. This is not what Islam embodies in itself. These are just the outlines, the minimum. He also says, those who are most beloved to me and closest to me in assembly on the day of resurrection. And inshallah, all of us are aiming to be of those who are closest to the Prophet on the day of judgment. He says, will be those with the best morals amongst you. Not those with the most prayers, not those with the most fasting, not those with the most Quran, the best morals amongst you. And those who are the most hateful to me and farthest from me on the day of resurrection will be the talkative, the loudmouthed, and the hypocrites. In another saying, he says, the closest to you to me in the hereafter will be the most truthful of you in speech, the most faithful of you, the most fulfilling of his or her covenant, and the best of you in manners. And finally he says, and the closest of you to the people. Some people have this idea that to be a true Muslim, to be someone spiritual, you have to separate yourself from society. You have to go and live a secluded life full of prayer and contemplation. That is not what a Muslim is. If you want to be close to Allah, you need to be close to the people. If you are far from the people, then you are far from His beloved, which is us. He also said, through an immaculate character, the servant of Allah attains the status of the one who is always fasting and always up worshipping throughout the night. So if you had someone who only did the bare minimum, he only prayed the wajibat, he only fasted Ramadan, and that was it, and he paid his zakat, did nothing extra, but he was of the best of characters, his status is the same as that who was up all night praying and fasting all days of the year. Imam Ali alayhi salam says of the Prophet, he summarizes it nicely. He says, in generosity, he was the head of all people. He was the bravest of all. He was the most truthful, loyal, and had a kind disposition. He was the most social person. Whoever encountered him initially was influenced by his awe, and after meeting him and being in his company, used to become fond of him. I have never seen anyone like His Eminence before or after that. This hadith summarizes what it is to have akhlaq, to have the highest akhlaq. And we're going to explore these different headings along the way, inshallah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Before that, answer this question. This is what the Muslims were taught by the Prophet. When the Muslims returned to Mecca after Fatih Mecca, many had left their parents who had not accepted Islam. They were asked by their parents, so what has Muhammad taught you? What do you think the Prophet taught them to answer? So Yusuf is in the lead. That heaven is beneath your feet. They came back as victors. They came back as people who were kicked out, oppressed, and returned victorious. And their parents, in disdain, asked them, what has Muhammad taught you? What is it that you left us for all this and did all this? And they said to them, he taught us that the heaven is beneath your feet. Imagine what that does to the heart of a mother or a father who hears that. This is Islam. Imam Hussein alayhi salam says from his father that the Holy Prophet purified himself from 3 things, and 3 things he had nothing to do with. What were the 3 things that he purified himself from? You can select multiple answers, obviously.
How bad is your internet?
One should be pretty easy. Yusuf's, Sarah's quite catching up there. He freed himself from argumentation. Have a think about that. How many arguments do you have in a single day? Just think about home. How many arguments do you have at home? About little things, pathetic things, useless things. How many arguments do you have at school? Some of us have arguments where we're trying to prove God to other people, and we think this is, doing God's work. But actually, we're not actually debating, we're arguing. There's a civil discussion, and then there's arguing. Vain acts, showing off basically. He never used to show off. He had no desire to stand out amongst the people. And extravagance. He would never do things extravagantly. Now the next one, what were the 3 things that he had nothing to do with? Oh, that didn't work. Did I skip it by accident? I did, didn't I? Anyway. The 3 things that he had nothing to do with were criticizing. Now, or fault finding. This is a disease of the modern era. Everyone puts reviews. Everyone has an opinion about how good this person did their job, how good this place was. What was the Barakah program like today? Wasn't very good. It's a bit boring. Everyone has views, and expresses these views. The Prophet ﷺ never criticized. There's a hadith from Anas bin Malik who says that I worked as a servant for the Prophet for a short while. He says, I never heard the Prophet say, why did you do this? Or this could have been done better if you did it this way. He never criticized. Whatever we did, he accepted. And if there was something that needed to be done, he would do it without asking us. Now, what was the Prophet like in public? The one thing that he was famous for was he never made a scene in public. He walked like a normal human being. He wasn't loud. You wouldn't know if you were down the street that the Prophet was walking. Whereas, if you compare that to how some of our youth walk down the streets these days, their hand gestures are all over the place. Their voices are as loud as anything. This is not the behavior of a Muslim. He was present in funerals. He would always attend funeral ceremonies. He always visited the sick. He shook hands with his companions and was the first to salute. He asked about anyone who he didn't see for 3 days. Now, in this day and age, it's really easy to contact someone. Really easy just to message them or give them a call. I made a mistake. He didn't. Whatever they said, no matter how unbelievable it was, he would accept it. خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين. This is a quote from the Quran. Take to forgiveness. And it's written in an amr, in a command to the Prophet. Take to forgiveness and enjoy good, and turn aside from the ignorant. It's commanding the Prophet to take people's excuses. Another attribute he had in public was, I'll start by describing what happens normally in gatherings that I've been at. You'll usually have in a gathering 1 or 2 people who are the stars of the show. They're the most charismatic, the most talkative. Everyone wants to be around them. Everyone wants to talk with them. Everyone wants to hear from them. And so you'll find that the majority of people's attention is to these people. They're the core of the group. The Prophet ﷺ used to always distribute his attention equally with all his companions. Not to just the guy he liked the most, not to the person that was the most charismatic, but equally to all of them. Even the one that was really shy and the one that was an outcast in the group. This is something we need to learn. Because it means that the gatherings we have when we're having fun is actually a duty upon us. It's not there just for fun. If I distribute my attention equally with everyone, then I have fulfilled what Allah is wanting from me. And so that gathering becomes more than just a fun gathering. At home, how was he at home? It's famous that the Prophet used to do the chores in the house. He didn't think that it was a woman's job. And in that day and age, it was almost unheard of. He milked the goats, he mended his shoes, he did his own tasks, he wouldn't give them to someone else to do. He fed the animals, he swept the house, i.e. he vacuumed. He tied the camels, he ate with his servants, he kneaded the dough, and he purchased groceries. Now remember, this is the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the greatest man on earth. Do you think anyone would actually go to him and say, can you go milk the goats? Can you go sweep the floor? No one would dare to give him any tasks. That means he would do this on his own. He wouldn't wait for someone to tell him. And this is a lesson for us. In our house, we all have jobs, all have chores. My chore is X, Y, and Z. My son's chore is this. For example, the boys take it in turn once a week to do the laundry. Today Musa did the laundry. But does that mean you stop at your chore? No. you look around and you see what needs to be done. You don't wait for someone else to do it. And finally, which I already talked about, he never criticized. Don't criticize your brother, your sister. I hope you don't criticize your parents. Don't criticize your friends, even in joking, because it still cuts. Even though you all laugh about it, it still cuts inside. Should have put my one. All right. So what were the main characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? If we want to understand his morality and his character, I've tried to make it into 5 or 6 points that we can inshallah take. First is al-rahmah, al-rahmah shadida, which is, I've translated as love and care. I know Google translates as mercy, but I don't think mercy is the correct translation for rahmah. Because rahim comes from raham, womb. The womb is where the Arabs take this word from. And it means, what is the womb? Womb is the thing that protects and nurtures and loves what's inside. It takes care of all its needs. Mercy in English is usually when you have dominance over someone and you can punish them or cause them harm, but you're merciful, you step back. Rahmah is not that. Rahmah is much more akin to love and care. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. In the Quran, the word Rahim is mentioned 127 times. 126 times it refers to Allah, and once it refers to the Prophet. Out of his characteristics and his moral, this was the greatest. His love and care. On the day of Uhud, on the battle of Uhud, one of the mushrikeen hit the Prophet with his sword on his helmet. The edges of his helmet dug into his cheeks and bled. After the battle, the Muslims came and were helping to take out the metal pieces that had gone into his cheek. And as they were doing this, they saw the Prophet lift up his arms in prayer. And they were expecting that he was going to say a prayer against the person who hit him, or against the mushrikeen. And instead he said, Allahumma, guide my people, for they do not know. Have a think about that. Who of us would be able to do that? A companion came to the Prophet and told him that about a particular tribe, and he told him that this tribe had called you a liar, and they have done all sorts of evil and immorality. They disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So pray on them. Idu alayhim. So the Prophet raised up his arms and said, Allahumma, guide this tribe and bring them to us. The companion was surprised and turned round to the Prophet and started to object. The Prophet replied, I was not sent to curse, but as a mercy. The Prophet was scared that Allah would punish the people who disapproved, who hurt him, and he would be the reason that they would be punished. So he would pray for them out of all of his heart. We see this in another place as well, in the Battle of Karbala. In the Battle of Karbala, narrations tell us that the Imam Hussein alayhi salam, near the end, faced the opposition, and tears were running down his face. And they asked him, they said to him, are you scared of death? Have you become a coward? And he replied to them, no, I'm crying for you. I'm upset that you may reach hell because of what you do to me. Genuine care for the others, for other human beings. That is what a Muslim is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created every single human being. And every single human being in His creation is the most beloved to Allah. So if you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you need to love His beloved. We hate disobedience to Allah, but we don't hate people. Another time there was a procession going by for the corpse of a dead Jew. Now you remember the Jews had tried to kill the Prophet on 3 separate occasions in Medina. And as the procession went past, the Prophet stood up out of respect. And the other companions stayed sitting there and said, what are you doing? The guy's just a Jew. And he answered them, was he not a soul? This is the worth that the Prophet of Allah puts in other human beings. The second thing is his humbleness. This is the second characteristic. He was always humble. A stranger came looking for the Prophet. He had heard about him through the talk through the travelers, and he came looking for the Prophet. And he entered the mosque, and he looked around and he couldn't tell who the Prophet was. He said, who of you is Muhammad? Now, in our gatherings, you usually can tell who the head guy is. He sits on a bigger chair. He sits apart from other people. Everyone is looking at him. He might wear clothes that distinguish him from other people. But he couldn't tell, because the Prophet is always humble. He kept himself amongst the people, not aloft of the people. That's the second characteristic. Loyalty. I'm going to abandon this slideshow. Loyalty. After the Prophet left Mecca, he spent 8 years in Medina. And in those 8 years, there were wars and battles with the people of Mecca. Eventually, the Prophet returned to Mecca in the conquest of Mecca. And he returned victorious. He went into the Kaaba and he destroyed all the idols. And then he said to the people, he said to his companions, they asked him, where do you want to stay this night? Where do you think he asked to stay? Put your hands up. Any suggestions? You're now the leader who has conquered Mecca. Mecca, where the Kaaba is. Where would you want to stay? Sorry? In his old house? No. In his old house was one of his relatives. And he said, I don't want to kick him out. Where else would he stay? Where else would you want to stay? Kaaba? He didn't ask to stay in the Kaaba. When I heard this story, it brought a tear to my eye, to be honest. He said to them, put up a tent for me next to the grave of Khadija. The loyalty, the love that this man had, you cannot imagine. That's the third characteristic, loyalty. The other is being determined and committed. I'm sure most of you have heard the story when he was in Mecca. The Arabs came to him and said, look, we will give you all our wealth, mountains of gold, the keys to the Kaaba. You will be our leader. Just leave Islam. And he said to them, if you give me the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I will not leave this religion. And you would think that someone who is committed and determined would become hard of heart. You've seen that when you're focused, for example, when you're studying, you're really in the zone, and anyone comes to you, leave me alone, I'm in the zone. Don't talk to me. You become hard of heart. And yet that's not what the Prophet had. He had the softest of hearts. He was in touch with these emotions. He used to sometimes ask some of the companions who had a nice voice to recite the Quran to him. And he would sit there and listen to it. And one of the times they reached this ayah, فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جِئْنَا مِنْ كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ بِشَهِيدٍ وَجِئْنَا بِكَ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ شَهِيدًا. I don't have the translation, I'm going to do a rough one now. How is it when we bring all people and we bring their leaders and we bring you as a witness for your people? He would start to cry. He took his job so seriously that it frightened him. His job in his eyes was to save all of humanity. Anyone who was astray, he felt was a shortcoming from his part. It clearly wasn't, but that's how he felt. It's like a parent. A loving parent, will do all they can for their children to guide them on the right path. But if they go astray, they always blame themselves. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I said something. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I showed them the ugly side of religion. Nabi Nuh alayhi salam lost his son. And I'm sure he used to blame himself. The final one is empathy. Empathy not just for other Muslims. Empathy for all of Allah's creations, humans and animals. Have a soft heart. Don't be macho. Don't be cold. Don't justify being evil or being cold-hearted to people. That is not what the Prophet used to do. Finally, I'd like to talk to you about what we can do. Some very basic guides for us. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Allah commands justice wal-ihsan. What is ihsan? Ihsan is to do the best. Not to do better, to do the best. In grace as well as generosity. Now, there are two terms that you need to helping people reciprocally. So, they're nice to you, you're nice to them. They bring you food, you take them food. That's a minimum. Al-akhlaq is more than that. Makaram al-akhlaq is where you can control your emotions. You have full control of your feelings. And you do good despite how you feel. You do good despite your emotions. You don't consider what this person has done to you in the past, but you only consider what is good. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was asked, what are the limits of good manners? So this is makarim al-akhlaq. Sorry, this is husn al-khalq. He says, soften your wings or lower your side, meaning be humble. Speak nicely. And when you meet your brother, meet him with happiness and joy. Don't tease people or hurt them. Everyone has problems in life. And maybe a smile from you will be something that lessens some of their problems, makes their life that bit easier. A kind word is very easy to give. but can have such a dramatic effect on the person. Imam Sadiq was then asked, so what is makarim al-akhlaq then? He said, forgiving those who wronged you. So the other one was the minimum. The minimum you should do is smile to people, talk nicely to them. Makarim al-akhlaq, forgiving those who wronged you, maintaining ties with those who cut ties with you, doing good to those who wronged you. So first you forgive them, then you actually do good to them, and giving to those who deprived you. ولا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم. And know that not equal are good and bad. Repel evil by a deed which is what? Not good, not better. Allah is very specific. The best. So if your reply to an evil deed that is done to you is to do good, then you haven't fulfilled what Allah wants. If it is better, you haven't fulfilled what Allah wants. Only if it is the best you can do, then you have fulfilled it. Inshallah, all of us can start to at least identify one shortcoming that we have. This is the month of Rajab, the month of the Prophet. The month of the Prophet. And inshallah, it can serve as a reminder of who the Prophet was and who we are tasked to emulate. This is a dry topic. It's not an exciting topic, not battles and armies and tactics. But I think this is the essence of Islam. Achieve it in the coming months, especially during Ramadan. And inshallah becomes a habit for all of us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت.
Ahsan, Dr. Yasser. Can we please have another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Thank you, Dr. Yasser, as always, for your insightful talks, and of course, always enjoying the interactive segment, including the quiz. Alhamdulillah, I think we've all developed a greater understanding of Rasulullah and the understanding of one of his greatest attributes, that being his character and akhlaq, which we will, inshallah, implement into our own lives. We will now be